Today's podcast is a bit different from our normal. We're talking about an aspect of leadership we haven't really covered in our past 50-odd episodes, and yet it's one that every leader has: a voice. How often do we stop to think about our voice? Do you spend as much time thinking about how you sound as much as what you're going to say? What does your leadership voice say about you? How do others perceive your leadership, and do they want to put their trust in you and follow your lead? Today, we're very lucky to be joined by David Pope to bring us the wisdom and learnings and experiences from his 30-year career in the UK and Asia. Today's going to be a fun one. So, welcome to you, David. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here. I'm very well, thanks.
Good. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for giving us your time. Let's get straight into it. First of all, let's find out a bit more about you. So why don't you introduce yourself in 60 seconds?
Right, 60 seconds. Okay, so my name is David Pope, and I am the founder and managing director of All Voice Talent. So I am a BBC-trained executive voice coach operating between Hong Kong, Dubai, and London. Now, I've spent the last 30 years working with thousands of people globally across a huge range of industries, and with one aim in mind, and that's just to help good speakers to become great speakers. And I do that through my one-on-one coaching programs and my CPD accredited workshops and webinars, and also my online videos as well, which look at voice, presence, and storytelling for business. So was that 1 minute?
Yeah, I think it was probably pretty close, I would say. Well, I'm excited to have you here, if not least because I'm sure I'll learn a few things as much as our audience will as well. So my first question to you is talking about leadership voice. So what does that mean to you? Why is it such a critical part of a leader's toolkit?
Well, I think nowadays there's a need really for leaders to be more out in the field, so to speak, because they need to be the face of the company. And also, I think this coincides a lot with the rise in social media. So typically, a lot of the leaders that I'm working with, they are having to be more aware of their own brand as well. So people speaking at conferences, they're maybe going on TV, having press, media interviews. They're being asked to attend panel discussions. And some of the things that I'm doing at the moment, actually, with a lot of C-suite, is they are having to do videos. A lot of their comms teams are asking them to record videos, which they're not used to doing. So I think there's a lot of pressure, not only to perform well in your role, but actually to sound good while you're doing it. And really, I mean, for me, you asked me about what is the leadership voice. I think for the leadership voice it's like a balance. It's a balance of authority. You've got to come across with authority, but you've got to have this energy when you deliver. You've got to be obviously a confident speaker, and your voice, for me, it has to be warm. So there's this piece around authenticity as well. Ultimately, you've got to engage and you've got to inspire. And this, to me, really, this whole balance, it's about having a voice with gravitas. It's about being passionate about what you're speaking about, but keeping it grounded in authority. And just coming back to the question you were asking about, like the toolkit, I think as well, yes, the leadership toolkit, for me, there are actually three things that should go into that toolkit. So the first is about the voice. So is it engaging? Is it compelling? The second thing, though, the second piece is about presence, how leaders can command the attention of maybe single listeners or entire rooms. And then the final piece is about the delivery. It's the crafting of the message, being able to craft a message which moves people to take action, which inspires people, which educates. So that is, for me, in terms of communication, that's the leadership toolkit. It's the voice, it's the presence, and then it's the crafting of the message.
Those are, and this made me think of a lot of things whilst you've been talking there about what we're seeing in our organization, as you say, about the presence particularly virtually as well, which we'll come back to a bit later.
Sure.
I just wanted to quickly ask, though, in your experience, you've coached CEOs and trained like TEDx speakers in your career.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, you've got a large library of online video courses that you deliver. In that time, what would you say is the most common sort of aha moment that leaders experience about their voice and their presence that you've just described?
The most common aha moment. Well, if I had $1 for every time somebody had said to me once they've been through my training program, wow, if only I'd learned this earlier on in my career, I would have retired by now. So 15 years ago, I created the voice intensive program. So my
Right.
whole methodology of working with one-on-one with people is I record the voice, I play it back, and then I analyze it. And we make judgments about people based on the sound of the voice. So just like we make judgments about other people, people are going to make judgments about us as well. And a lot of people that I work with, they say that they hate the sound of their voice when they hear it on a recording. But in a leadership role, you've really got to be at peace with your voice. You've got to understand the nuances, the strengths and the weaknesses. So this voice intensive program, it really does, it throws out a lot of aha moments. But I think probably the three most common ones would be, probably the first one would be pacing. And typically people would say, oh my goodness, I had no idea I spoke so fast. The second one will be about intonation, and it's usually a very common thing that they say is, I sound so boring. So that's a judgment that they make about themselves. Now that to me is to do with intonation. And I think the third thing, surprisingly, even with the C-suite, is filler words, the
Yes.
the ums, the you knows, all of that. So what I find is, I've just done one now. It's a very natural part of discourse, but if it's getting in the way of the delivery, then we need to be conscious of that. And so just like the camera never lies, the microphone never lies as well. And that's why I say for people to really understand in these leadership roles where maybe newly promoted, they're being called on to do much more communication. They really need to understand the nuances, the good things, but also the things that need to be improved.
It's again, as you sort of speak, it makes me think back to our own world and the way that we deliver there. Something that you mentioned right at the beginning about people don't like the sound of their own voice. That going through these processes is very much a step out of the comfort zone, which is what we would say is one of the key points to which learning can really take place. Is
Absolutely.
Stepping out that comfort zone, and as soon as you start critiquing yourself, that's when you can really learn and make those changes that you would maybe want to make. It's So as we mentioned slightly earlier, there's a lot of now there's a big demand for leading in a virtual space or a hybrid space. So many people work remotely, as we know, in big global organizations. So the likelihood of being in the sort of same space as maybe your leader or as the teams that you're part of, it's a different kind of space for people to be in. So how is that shift? How have you seen differences, and what things have you changed? What do leaders need to pay more attention to? You touched on a little bit earlier about sort of presence within a screen and a microphone. But what else? Yeah. What other tips could you give that would maybe help leaders there?
Sure. Well, we're all doing online now. There's no avoiding it. I mean, even pre-COVID, things were starting, but now it's just become a completely normal modus operandi. There's a great quote from Stanford Graduate School of Business, and I use this when I'm working with people. So I've got it here. I can read it. Even just a 10% increase in vocal variety can have a highly significant impact on your audience's attention to and retention of the message. So vocal variety, that is the thing. What is vocal variety? Volume, pacing, pausing, intonation, and word stress. So that would be the first shift. In other words, what leaders need to be conscious of is effectively bringing the energy. You need to bring energy to these online conversations, and you do that through vocal variety. Because as you mentioned, being in the online world, if we were having meetings in boardrooms, we can pick up on the presence, we get that energy, we get that connection, but you typically don't get it as much in the online environment. So leaders need to think about a few things. The first thing is volume. Is my voice too soft, or is it actually too loud? And they need to think about the pacing, coming back to the pacing. So a lot of people, they rush through important pieces of information, right? They don't slow down and stress the key pieces of information, especially if they're giving like facts, figures, complex ideas. We need to be conscious of that. And I think the other one as well, and I speak to people when I'm coaching them, and if I'm coaching them online, and I will say to them, are you reading your presentation to me? So what happens is, here we are on video now, and people will put an entire script next to their computer. But what happens is when you revert to reading something, the energy just goes. So it's a big difference between the reading voice and the speaking voice. So that's also important. But there are also other practical things as well. So for example, standing. If you are somebody in your organization, you've got a standing desk, I would really, really suggest that if you're presenting online, having meetings, you do it with a standing desk, because what happens is you get the presence piece as well. The body opens, the voice gets stronger, and you can use a lot more physical presence than you might be if you're sitting down. So that's the first thing. Microphone, maybe have an external mic. You and I have got one now. This gives our voice more clarity. It's stronger, it's better. And thinking about lighting and camera position, these are all very sort of normal things. But one final thing as well, a little tip, is if you are opening meetings, if you're wanting to engage from the get-go, you look into the camera. So a lot of people, what they do is when they're talking to people on screen, let's say there's 20 or 30 people on your screen, the eye line goes down and you tend to look at everybody there. However, if you open the meeting and look directly into the camera, then what will happen is you are actually directly looking into their eyes, and that engages them from the get-go. So
it's really interesting you mentioned that, because I wonder if there's that specific detail is a conversation I've had before, and I wonder if there's because I've often thought about the way we present this podcast as an example, and I think I've seen some videos online, and particularly when if it's a meeting, I think you're right. I think there is definitely benefit to speaking into the lens. However, I think we're so used to being in meetings now where we have got this slightly off camera gaze where we're looking to the other person, that's become almost the norm. And so then as soon as you bring that back, it can almost look a little bit intense if it's not done right. I think you've got, because you're so trained in it, so well versed in it, that it makes it look supernatural, and you can not look too intense. But I've seen some where it's like rabbit in the headlights.
Right. No, we don't
to be aware
that.
of. Yeah.
No,
but it's interesting, isn't it? That way that's shifted, because you're right. And if you are, in a normal circumstance, trust is gained through eye contact.
Yes, absolutely.
And yet, yes, in certain circumstances, if you're watching a video, then yes, you would want that to be delivered to camera.
Yeah.
And in some ways, there's an interesting shift. I've seen a few podcasts where it's like, there was one famous one not that long ago that got quite a bit of, because there was the guest was quite a high profile guest, but was
Right.
so like rabbit in the headlights. And
Way too
somebody you would think
intense.
would be quite a bit better than that,
Right, right.
but yeah.
No, I think the key here is when you're opening the meeting, like I'm
Mm,
doing now, right? So opening the meeting, look directly into the camera, because then this sets the agenda, it sets that sense of authority,
yeah, yeah,
leadership. But
yeah,
then once things start unfolding, well, very naturally, I mean, when
yeah.
you were just talking to me then, my eyes went down and started looking at you. I don't think it's not a problem to kind of look around the screen, but
Mm,
if you want to influence from the get-go, I would strongly suggest look into the camera, but just
yeah,
for a little bit. Start the
yeah.
meeting, but don't keep looking intensely. Absolutely, it'll be
That's it. Yeah.
bit freaky. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
And
definitely not.
I think it comes from practice, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And I would imagine that's a big part of what you coach people, is that
Yes.
you're not going to get it right instantly. There's so many, especially if it's new to you. I mean, even like for years, I've been setting up this space to get lighting right, to get sound right, to get all this, that, and the other. And it does take a lot of energy and effort, which a lot of people, it's not at the top priority of their mindset yet.
Yes.
But I think that is starting to change a bit.
I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Bad habits then. As we've sort of talked, let's move into some bad habits, because they're always fun to talk about.
Habit. Okay.
So I guess we've kind of touched on a few of these already, but in terms of things that can undermine confidence, trust, and authority, what sort of are some of the bad habits that have really stuck out to you that you've seen over time, and how can they be corrected?
Okay. So, yes, we've touched on things like filler words, intonation, pacing. These are really, really critical, because if you want to lead, you need to be a little bit slower, a little bit more engaging with the voice. I think, we need to ask the question, what is a confident voice? And a confident voice, again, coming back to what I keep saying, it's about inspiring, engaging, captivating. Now, I'm recording this with you in Hong Kong. So I spent a lot of years in Hong Kong. I work a lot around Asia. And I also work, as I mentioned earlier, in the Middle East. So thinking about two specific areas. The first one is around articulation. So what is articulation? Articulation is basically enunciation. It's the way that we move our mouth. And the second thing is pronunciation, the way that we say particular words and phrases. Now, typically, a lot of, let's say, the native English speakers who are in senior positions, and then they are speaking to their core teams in the APAC region, right? And one of the bits of feedback that I get from the other senior leaders who are non-native speakers is that these particular speakers, the native speakers, they speak too fast, but they mumble, right? This is the perfect storm. So leaders need to be conscious in terms of the register, the people that they're speaking to. They need to not only slow down, but clarity, especially if you are speaking across different zones where you may have people from India, from Korea, from Japan, from Taiwan, from China, from Hong Kong, from Bangkok, all of these areas. And they've all got different perceptions of accent and understanding. So Western native speakers of English need to be conscious of that. On the reverse side, so again, if I'm asked to work with somebody who's been promoted up to the C-suite and they are a non-native speaker of English, they need to also be very, very careful about this. So it's not just about slowing down, but it's about having clarity in your message, because their second language is English. They are speaking to teams in English, and everybody is trying to figure out what they're saying. So if you don't have that clarity, then that's a particular issue. So these are, very practical things that you can do. I do a lot of exercises in helping people in articulation. I think the other piece as well, the bad habit, I'd like to call it information dump. Right? It's not so much about the voice, but it's about the delivery, coming back to the delivery piece. So Aristotle, are you familiar with Aristotle's tools of persuasion? Do you know?
I haven't read up on it recently.
Right, okay. So Aristotle's schools of persuasion. So Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, he lived in 300 BC. Now, he argued that the way to influence people, to get a buy-in, he was thinking about this a long, long time ago. Three things. The first is logos, which is the logic piece. The second is ethos, which is the credibility. The third is the pathos, which is the emotion. Leaders today, they're very good with the logos. So I work a lot with financial institutions, legal institutions. It's that very logic thing. So it just consecutively going through talking about, AUM, funds, etc., right? But at that level of leadership, you need to put something else into the mix. And that's the pathos, which is the emotion, which is the storytelling, which I mentioned earlier. So these leaders, they need to be thinking about that as well. So I'm not saying it's a particularly bad habit per se. We always need to have facts, but if you can mix it up with stories that connect, this is the beginning of this thing, charisma. People talk about charisma. So to your second question, you said, is it easy for leaders to correct these? Well, as you mentioned earlier, you learn by doing, right? And so think about Obama. Everybody talks about Obama. He's being, he's the poster boy for gravitas. But I tell you what, he has put the work in, right? It doesn't happen naturally. He has done it for years and years and years. So you've got to put the work in. So these people nowadays that maybe in our organizations that we admire, who we think they're charismatic, the chances are that earlier on in their careers, these are the people that put their hand up to maybe, host the annual dinner, to be the MC, or to speak for the team, or to, give a presentation to senior management. So if you're coming up through that sort of succession pipeline, putting your hand up, saying yes to things, that is going to help you to be able to get better. And then ultimately you can correct the issues, basically.
Another thing about Obama that just struck me then is, and again, is maybe another, I wonder if you would agree with this, but he's one thing I've noticed about him is that he delivers a lot of speeches, let's say, with a lot of pauses.
Yes.
There's always a lot of space in between things that he says. And so there's, it's really, I just something I've noticed recently. Is there something that, what's that for? Is that just to give sort of space to digest the thing that he's just said? What is that? Is that useful for other people to use?
Absolutely. So good speakers can change their voice according to content and according to audience. Now, I wouldn't suggest if a leader is maybe having a boardroom meeting, right, and there's 20 people sitting around the table, speaking in that Obama style with these long pauses, it would just be silly, right? So he is using an oratorial style because the people that he's speaking to is usually thousands of people. So yes, it's about helping people to take in the information, but it's also that style of delivery, which is only pertinent to that large auditorium style delivery, right? But you think about TED speakers, so I work sometimes with TEDx people, getting them ready. And they don't do those long pregnant pauses, because that is to do with it's that connection, which is more a sort of flow of language, not fast, but certainly not those long pauses. But coming back to what I was saying about the logos, right? The logic stuff. If you are giving people lots and lots of information, and it's quite complex information, then absolutely you've got to pause. You've got to pause so people can take in the information. Basically,
I think, like, you're right. There's context is really important, then, isn't it, to how you communicate? And one rule doesn't necessarily fit all. I think we kind of touched on that with the eye contact into a lens, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And being aware of these little details, I think, can be really important and have a bigger impact on what it is, the message that you're trying to get across.
Yes, absolutely.
My
Yeah.
next question to you is about the how the voice is linked to perceived authenticity and performance. Do you find that men and women experience differences in how their voice is heard in leadership roles? Is this a personal challenge or a systemic one?
Wow, great question. So I think it's both. I think it's both personal, personal challenge, and it's also a systemic challenge. So the first thing is you've got to be authentic as a communicator, right? I'm not an actor, and I'm never going to get people when I'm working with them to deliver in this theatrical kind of over the top way. So I get people to communicate in their own authentic style. And what I'm doing is I'm then looking at these vocal nuances that we've talked about before. But people have to be happy in the way that they're delivering. So I'd never push somebody to deliver in a way that they feel uncomfortable in. But let's use pitch as an example, right? So I think there's definitely a relationship between pitch and authority. We do tend to associate people with a slightly deeper voice, that's the voice of a leader. So on a personal challenge, I've worked with women, but I've also worked with men as well who want to work on the volume and also the pitch of the voice. So that becomes the personal challenge, that maybe they want to get to that next level, but they are aware that their voice pitch is not maybe as low as they would like it to be. Now, we all have different pitch ranges, and that's so you and I, different pitch ranges. This is to do with our physiology, and it's also to do with our gender as well. So everybody that I work with, we all have different pitch ranges. So we all have to find a pitch range which is authentic to us, right? Now, the problem is, coming back to what you're saying, is like the systemic challenge. Women get judged much more harshly than men around this concept of pitch, that idea of pitch. So when women raise their voices and the pitch goes up, they are judged as over emotional or too aggressive. And there's also the other one, which is this uptalk, the phenomenon of uptalk. Do you know uptalk? Where you
No,
go.
it's not something I'm familiar.
So uptalk is where the voice pitch goes. So the intonation pattern goes up. So
Towards the end of a sentence.
That's right. And I'm
Right,
having an interview, and I really feel I'm a great member of the team, and I'm very confident, and I know I can do this job. Right, that's uptalk. And it's a little bit of dissonance because we're expecting a strong statement, and it's sort of, are they asking a question? Now, the truth is, men do that as well, but it's the women that get judged harshly for that. Elizabeth Holmes, the disgraced CEO of Theranos. If you've ever listened to her, right? Well, after this recording, go and listen to her voice. That is an example of somebody who is maybe responding to a systemic challenge, right? They feel, to be part of the sort of the men's world, they've got to drop the voice. It is so inauthentic. Her voice pitch is so low. It just sounds laughable. And we see through this, right? We understand. So that's what I mean. We've got to have an authentic pitch range, which is comfortable for us. And then I think as well, with men's pitches, I think there's also that, as I said, that understanding of what the leadership voice is like, and that Western concept. It's loud, it's deep, it's resonant. Well, I've worked with enough C-suite over here in Asia and in the Middle East, and these people, they don't speak like that, right? They don't have that perception. So it comes into culture as well, but they're effective and very, very good leaders, but they don't have that perception. So I think it's both. It's personal, but it's also systemic. But I think it comes back to what I said at the very, very beginning, which is just about this balance. What is the leadership voice? Authority, and that's about pitch. Energy, that's about vocal variety. And then it's the confidence, being able to speak up, and the warmth. Now, the warmth is about authenticity. So you put all of those together, and you're going to be a great communicator, an authentic communicator.
Well, there's some great advice there, and I'm wondering if we can dive a bit further into that, because I'm going to
Sure.
ask you if it's possible to take me through an exercise and maybe or share a top tip. I'm already readjusting, getting ready for it. But what
Right.
would be a sort of a way to start this sort of day one of learning how to improve on our leadership voice? Where
Okay,
would we?
day one.
What can we do?
Let's move it forward a little bit more. Let's say day
Okay,
2, day 3. The only reason
sure.
is because we've touched on these other areas of vocal variety. I talked a little bit about articulation, breath. Breath is a great one. So basically, the power and the quality of our voice depends on the power and the quality of our breath. So,
Right.
fun fact, according to the American Lung Association, we only use 30 to 35% of our full lung capacity. So if we want to have a voice which is a bit more dynamic, a bit more engaging, has that energy, has that volume, then we need to engage the diaphragmatic voice. So,
Yes.
right. So I'm sitting here, I have got my hand on my chest and I'm breathing in, right? And what's happening is my chest is going up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Very normal. This is what we call shallow breathing. You and I have been doing this as we've been speaking to each other. Not a problem at all. But if we want to have a voice which is a little bit more engaging, we need to engage the diaphragmatic breath, right? And the diaphragmatic breath is basically it's belly breathing. We breathe into our belly. Now, the reason I think this is a good top tip for people is asking the question, what happens to a speaker's voice when they get nervous, right? 2 things, and I'm sure, if you've attended conferences or been at workshops, if you hear somebody who's nervous, 2 things. Number 1 is the pitch of the voice goes up, and number 2 is the speech rate increases, right? They get faster and faster. So this exercise is about grounding you, which slows you down. It's also about lowering your pitch authentically. And because it's about connecting the voice with the breath, it gives you that powerful voice. So that's a bit of a long introduction. What I'm going to do is maybe I'll have to stand up a tiny bit so you can see. I'm going to put my fingers here, that little middle bit, right? I'm going to go sideways. And now when I breathe in, my stomach is coming in and out, right? So when I breathe in, stomach goes out, exhale, stomach goes in. Now, the reason is, so the exercise, and this is what I get people to do, if they are about to step onto a stage, if they're speaking at a conference, they're giving a TED talk, whatever, I get them to put their fingers here, they breathe in and they go like this. They go, huh, 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 right? Have a go. Huh.
So that was huh.
Correct. Huh.
Huh. Yep. Huh.
Right. Now
Using the diaphragm.
Correct. I can see your fingers are starting to go in and out. That means to me that you've engaged the diaphragm. Because people, again, when they get a little bit nervous, the voice goes, right? And when some people do this exercise, they'll go, we don't want that. And we also don't want, right?
Yeah.
This is not projection. So if you want to engage the voice immediately, lower the pitch, and have that strong dynamic voice on the get-go, it's huh, huh, huh. And then it's, good afternoon, everybody. My name is David. It's great to see you all here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. You can hear the difference, right?
Yeah.
So it's just playing with pitch and the breath.
Well, I really enjoyed that because it's such a simple thing that you can do, and just by having that in your back pocket ready to just by doing that process, that couple of seconds just focusing on that will have as much of a difference as the actual physiological exercise itself. I feel slightly like I was at a slight advantage in that back in my youth, I did youth theatre and had to do a lot of projection type exercises and things way back then, and be able to get somebody at the back of the theatre to hear you, even if, and to make it sound like you're talking quietly, but also being able to be heard as well.
Absolutely. And so that's the difference. You see, some people think that that sort of voice is shouting. Well, when you shout, everything
it's noticeably different, right? Yeah,
totally. Yeah. And that kills that credibility. But having that projection, that grounded voice, and also if you're a fast speaker, 100% it slows you down. It absolutely slows you down. So
nerves are going to have such an impact, aren't they?
Yeah,
nerves are going to tense the body, aren't they? They're just going to, and that's going to happen to everybody, and that's pretty. I suppose if you do it for a living, then that would start to fizzle out a little bit. But I think that's what's great about that little exercise, is that it's so simple that it just takes your mind away from everything else that you're about to do, that you can
absolutely. I mean, I stood up to do the demo, but then I sat down to do the exercise. So if you are on an online meeting, right, and you're feeling a little bit nervous, just on your own, before, obviously make sure the camera's not on and you're not connected, but just on your own, and then you just switch the camera on. Good morning, everybody. Great, and then you've got that energy, and that's that bringing that energy as well to engage people.
That's it. Yeah, and that's so important in engaging teams, for sure. And we've, it's something we deliver on as well when we're delivering programs. Maybe not quite as specifically as that, but yeah, absolutely true. So continuing with the advice theme, then I have one final question to you, even though I could spend probably all day talking to you.
I could with you as well. Yeah. Wonderful.
My final question to you is the same question we ask all of our guests, which is if you were looking back, turning the focus back on yourself, if you were looking back at your career and you had the opportunity to talk to your younger self and give some advice, what would that advice be?
Whoa, what would that advice be? The first thing that comes to mind is don't sweat the small stuff. I was thinking when I was sort of setting up, I'd get so gnarled up with things, the very small stuff. Looking back now, I've been doing this for a long time. It's kind of laughable what I used to get so worked up about. So that'd be the first thing. Don't sweat the small stuff. Second thing I would say, and it's still very key to me now, is find good mentors. So I'm very, very fortunate that friends of mine, we've come through this together. The two people that I know, we've come through actually from university together. One of them is the global head of marketing for an organization. The other one is very high up and works in business development. So I can run ideas by them and they will give me honest feedback. So there have been certain situations where I might have turned left and they said, no, go right. So that's the other thing. I think make sure that you've got a good support network of mentors to get that honest feedback. And then I think the final thing would be, what would that be? It would be adaptable. Listen to the market, be adaptable. So you mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, my online video courses. So this all came about because I got trapped in Singapore just when COVID was starting to kick off.
Right.
And this gave me the bandwidth. It gave me the space because I was, basically imprisoned. I couldn't get back to Hong Kong. And it gave me the space to start thinking about how I was going to create these courses. And these courses now, 5-6 years down the line, they've been bought by Fortune 500s, global law firms, individuals. So adapt, listen to the market, adapt, be flexible. That's what I would always say, even now, that advice for myself.
Yeah. And that is often the question I throw back, which is do you still live by the advice, or do you find yourself living by the advice? But it sounds like you're living it every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Running my own business, I'm constantly sort of adapting.
Of course, yeah. Well, David, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I feel like I've already learned a lot. I'm sure there's still a lot more I could learn from you. But thank you very much again for giving us your time today. It's been
absolute
brilliant. Thank
pleasure.
You.
It's been great speaking to you as well. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So that just leaves me to say, if you'd like to find out any more about the work that David does or the work that Impact does, or if you'd like to connect with either of us on LinkedIn, then you'll find all of the links that you need in the description of where you found today's episode. So that just remains me to thank David one more time for joining me today. Thank you, David.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And until the next time, take care.
Hey.